Uh-oh. Guess what? Ladies and gentlemen, he has returned to the WAPJ airwaves after a slight hiatus due to, let's just say, professional obligations. Ladies and gentlemen, bringing to the WAPJ stages, it's the one, it's the only, it's the man on a mission, T-Boz. What's up, bro?
I think I see that tape recorder with the little reel going, dun, 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 Mission Impossible. Remember, if you choose this mission, T-Boz will self-destruct in 30 seconds. Everyone listening to the show I know is over 55, and they can visually see the beginning of that show, you know, the Mission Impossible show. Good morning, everyone. Welcome in. Come on in. I've missed you guys. Thank you for spending your Thursday morning with me, what Jock has dubbed Friday Eve. Actually, I was on vacation in Washington with Lady Boz, my beautiful daughter Emily, her boyfriend Storm, and then our dear friends Fred and Lucille. And we were down there to get Jock as congressman. That's what we were down there for. He said I was there on a professional mission, but a wonderful time in the nation's capital. Come on in. Come in, George. Hold the door. There's people coming in. Busy time of year. Plenty of room. Chairs over here. We put some chairs to the left. You guys can join in. So thank you for coming in and getting a little recharge, a little rejuvenation, some words of wisdom and moments of meditation. I'm going to jump around a little bit today. It's going to be the same show, but I want to interject something. So we're going to go right over to Stan, say it with me, the coffee man, and let's see what he has in the refreshment table. Good morning, Stan. We've missed you. How are you? Well, what do we got, Stan? Hazelnut autumn blend. Delicious. Cranberry bread, pumpkin bread, cider, hot and cold cider, hot chocolate, all this stuff. What's in it? Dietetic, which is good for those of us struggling with sugar. We've got fruits, even some orange juice over there. Fabulous. And who sponsored the refreshment table today? Oh, really? Kelly's Crystal, wonderful little boutique downtown right on Main Street. Veronica and I have been there many times for the holidays. You feel like you're in the 1940s, Jock, when you go into Kelly's Crystals. And I think she's been in business about 8 years. And she really has so many things in there. You won't walk out of there with your hands empty. So go visit Kelly. Thank her for sponsoring the refreshment table. The refreshment table is open. Yes, man, you can go whenever you want throughout the show. Go up there and have something as you're listening. I want to dedicate the show this morning to a very dear friend who passed away yesterday. His name was Marshall Dean. Marshall was from down in Old Lyme. He just turned 90 in January. Marshall Dean was a good friend of mine. We called him Coach. And he would sit at what we called at Nucci's the IT table. It was 10 couples who were all widowed first time and were in new relationships. And we used to call it Nucci's High School. And Marshall Dean, he looked like the coach you had in high school. And Marshall was married 30 years. He buried 2 wives. First wife, 30 years, passed away. Second wife, 30 years, long-term marriages. And then he met Nancy, and that's who he sat with at the IT table. He also had a daughter that passed away a year ago. He was a volunteer fireman. He was in the military. He was a plumber. He used to do hay, was driving a tractor in his late 80s. He was from a generation of men that were the head of their household. They were dad, they were father, they were husband, and whatever life threw at them, they kept moving forward. He was a wonderful, wonderful square dancer, a wonderful dancer. He glided on the dance floor. And Fred and I and Lucille and all of us who sat at the IT table, some of those folks are down in Florida now, Jackie and Mike and Nancy and John and the whole gang there, Veronica and I obviously, and Nancy especially, we're going to miss Coach. And he kind of sets the standard in a way, and this happened as God would have it, for the theme of our show today. And when I went on vacation last week, 2 weeks ago, and I was in Bradley International Airport, there's a sign there that says, love the journey. And it doesn't say, have a nice journey. It doesn't say, enjoy the journey. It says, love the journey. Now, the journey to me is life. They were talking about the trip, but I always look at things psychoanalogy, okay? And so love the journey to me, I said, how do we love the journey, okay? I know a lot of you in the classroom today and listening on air, and maybe we'll listen to this in archives. A lot of us are struggling with health issues. We're looking at Israel. We're looking at the Ukraine. Some of us are struggling with the fact that we have addictions. Some of us have adult children that have come back to live with us. Some of us have children that have illnesses. Some of us have adult children that are still trying to find their way. Some of us have children and grandchildren that we are separated from for God knows whatever reason. Some of us have spousal problems. Some of us are trying to find new relationships and struggling with dating people after person and not really finding the right one. So how then do we love the journey? Marshall Dean had a lot of challenges and defeats that came his way, as I mentioned. But he kept living and moving, and in essence, as I said, set the tone for this talk and loved the journey. The other quote I saw was in the Supreme Court downstairs, and this second quote teaches us how to love the journey. Because loving the journey will help us become better people. Belva Lockwood, she was the first woman to practice law in the Supreme Court in 1888. After, in 1884, they said women should never practice law in the Supreme Court. But Belva Lockwood did, and here is her quote, which tells us or teaches us how to love the journey. Defeat is always advantageous when it bends the spirit, but does not break it. Boom. The question today is, what shape is your spirit in? Is your spirit being bent? As my friend Marshall, as I mentioned his life, his spirit was bent many times, but it was never broken. The way to love the journey, then, is that though our spirit is bent with all of the things I mentioned in terms of relationships and finances and all of those things, as Belva says, it should be advantageous to us if it teaches us to grow and to become more optimistic and to be able to handle challenges, but it does not break us. We look at 2 Timothy, and 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 says, "For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love." Boom. That's what Belva is talking about. That's what Marshall's life represents. That's how you love the journey. We have a spirit of power, not of fear. And that is the key as to what we're going to talk about. Further down, Romans chapter 8, verse 24. "And we know in all things God works for the good, and we are called for his perfect plan." It doesn't say his plan. It says his perfect plan. Each and every one of you listening to this show are called. Though right now some of you are in situations where that spirit is so bent you feel like it's going to break, but it won't. Why? Because 2 Timothy, you have a spirit of power and of love. We look at Amanda Gorman. She is an American poet. This is a beautiful poem. I want to get this right, so I'll read it slowly. You can write it down because I'll read it again. "The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is only light if we are brave enough to see it. If only we are brave enough to be it. Boom. Are we brave enough to be light and to see light as things like Israel, the Ukraine, homelessness, challenges that we have with our health? Are we brave enough, like Marshall was? Are we brave enough to see the light, but even better, as Amanda says, to be the light? It's not just enough to see it, but to be it. And I love what she says, to free it. In other words, as Timothy says, the Spirit is in us, the light is in us. But if we keep holding it in there because we just don't want to face tomorrow, it stays in there. But the light comes out when we stand up and sometimes accept the challenges or work through the challenges. Robert Schuller was a TV evangelist, says, let your hopes, not your hurts, shape your future. Bing, bang, boom. Sometimes we can't love the journey because we're carrying the hurts that our daughter doesn't let us see our grandchildren, the hurt that we have physical pain, the hurt that some of our investments didn't go right, the hurt that we see the slaughter in Israel. It hurts. But what Reverend Schuller says, it is better to focus on the hopes. Let your hopes define your future, not your hurts. Some of us are letting our hurts define tomorrow. We're basing tomorrow's dreams, tomorrow's destiny on what happened yesterday, last year, 10 years, 20 years, whatever. The hurt, the past is done. Time, as Timothy says, have that spirit of power and love. Matt Smith says this, it's not disappointments, it's how you get over them. Boom. So how do you get over them? All right. Hopefully not through intoxication and medications and all of that, but through the spirit and power of love. What Amanda says about the new dawn blooms as we free it. Okay? The power is within us. God gives us the power to be better people. And that power is within us to do those things. But we have to be brave enough. Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. I can do all things in God who strengthens me. I relied on that. My late wife's company called me 8 times to do talks about her when she passed away 8 years ago. And I was kind of new to public speaking at that time. And it was nerve-wracking to get up there in front of hundreds of people and speak. And every time I went up there, I said, I can do all things in God that strengthens me. So as we have defeat in our life, as we feel that spirit is bent, as we feel as if we're going to break because we just can't take another diagnosis, another doctor's appointment, another news about a loved one passing away, we can do all things in Christ who strengthens us. That spirit that Timothy's talking about is just what it says in Philippians. God in you, the Spirit in you. That's why Belver says it doesn't break. You have the power to do well. We have time for one more quote before the break. Mary Oliver says this. Someone I once loved gave me a box full of darkness. And it took me years to understand that that box was also a gift. Boom. What are you talking about? Sometimes the darkest moments of our lives, as when I lost my wife, there was a gift in there. And that gift was the people that surround me today, was my ability to become more faithful. My passion for public speaking came out of the loss of my wife. I spoke before that. I did eulogies. I did things here and there. But my heart and my soul wasn't into it till after I had to pass through that darkness. So sometimes the darkness that you're having right now will be your greatest gift, will be the tool or the force or the power, the fuel that will motivate you to do more than you ever imagined. The darkness can also be a gift. There's another good quote. Jock, why don't we do the break right now? It's 11:29, because then I want to zoom through the rest of this. Fair enough?
Sounds like a winner to me. Speaking of winners, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank all of our sponsors here for allowing us to bring you the quality community programming that we're able to do each and every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Over 25 years of community service to the fine community of Torrington, Connecticut, and now beyond. So we thank you for your support. And with that being said, we'll turn the show back over to T-Boz for more words of wisdom and moments of meditation.
Dieter F. Uchendorf says this: it's your reaction to adversity, not adversity itself, that determines your life story and how your life will develop. So it's how we face adversity. As Belva said, defeat is advantageous when it bends the spirit but doesn't break it. And I just keep mentioning my friend Marshall. He just buried a daughter last year from breast cancer, and he was 90 years old at the time. That wasn't easy for him to do. But he kept us. We saw him, and he was always smiling. He was dancing. In other words, it's not the adversity itself, but how we handle it. That is the key. And here is a quote. We used this once on the show, and it really reflects what Usendorf said, and it's by Anne Frank. And we went down to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, and I tell you, boys and girls, it's not a pretty thing, but there should never, ever be oppression like that of human beings ever again. And I know I say that as things are going on in Israel and Palestine, but what Hitler did to those people was the most god-awful thing. How do you love the journey then? Well, you listen to what Anne Frank says, and she says, I do not think of all the misery, but of the beauty that still remains. She doesn't say the beauty that should remain. She doesn't say the beauty that did remain. She says in that hellhole, she saw the beauty that still remains. Imagine that. That, my friends, is love the journey. That, my friends, is when your spirit is so bent it doesn't break. This was a young girl saying that. That is the key to what we're talking about today. That's what my friend Marshall did. We look at Luke chapter 10, verse 40, and it says there, Martha, burdened with much serving, came to him. Now, what's interesting about this scripture verse, this Bible story, is there's no miracle, there's no Pharisees, there's no Sadducees, there isn't all the things that you hear, abracadabra, people jumping out of off of mats and running, and children being brought back to life. It's just Jesus hanging out in the room with all his buds, having some matzah and soup, and they're just kicking back, and Mary is sitting there, Martha's sister, and Martha's running around with dishes and napkins, and she's so burdened with all of this that she just comes to him. Boys and girls, we're burdened with the things I mentioned earlier. We're burdened. Because of the spirit that Timothy talks about, go to him. In your busyness, go to him. You don't always have to be in a church, in a pew, kneeling. You can go to him just like Martha did. She's running around serving all these people, and she was so burdened with all of that, as we are burdened too, and she just came to him. And it's such a beautiful scripture passage because it doesn't have all the things that I mentioned before. There's no confrontation with religious leaders and political leaders. It's just people in a room like us, and a woman so burdened with all the work just came to him. Well, maybe it's not the work we're burdened with. It's finances or relationships we talk about. But go to him. He's there in the room waiting for you. Psalm 34 verse 4 says, I sought the Lord, and he answered me and delivered me and gave me hope. So, and the psalmist is David, and usually he's going into battle when he writes these things. So here he's saying that, and he went to the Lord who strengthens him, takes away his fears, and gives him hope. So those things all go together. Luke with Martha, the Psalms, and then Anne Frank, seeing the beauty that still exists. We look over at Elaine DeBott, and it's A-L, not Elaine as in the girl. The difference between, I love this. He's a British philosopher. Remember, my girlfriend's from England. We always have to have someone from Britain on this show. The difference between hope and despair is a different way of telling stories from the same fact. Boom. How many times have things happened to you? I say it all the time. I know you're all getting tired of hearing about the passing of my wife. I really don't talk about it from a negative standpoint. I talk about how it has lifted me up. It has brought people into my life. It made me a better person. It made me a better friend. It made me a better father. It made me a better brother. So the difference between as it says, between hope and despair is telling the same story, the same fact, but from a different angle. You have friends, I know a lot of you family members who tell the story the same way. But then there's some people like Anne Frank who find the silver lining in hell. Right? What does Winston Churchill say? If you're in hell, keep going. So it's telling the story with the same facts, but that's how you get through defeat, is seeing it in a bright light, being the light, being brave enough to be the light. I'm going to tell a story. I've told this before on the air about my late wife. It's called a special award. And so she worked for Benchmark, which is out in Avon, and she was a server. Anyway, once a year they would pick a great employee, and that person would go up to Massachusetts, where the company was headquartered, and they had a huge banquet, black tie, gowns. You got a $500 gift certificate, a meal, and a plaque, and all this other stuff. So Gloria was all excited because she heard that she was up to the special award. She'd come home every day, and she'd rub her hands together, have her tea, and she'd say, everyone's saying in the building now, I'm going to get the special award this year. I said, wow, it's fantastic. And she'd come home the next day, I'm getting so excited. A couple other people said, I'm the number one choice for the special award. I said, hon, that's wonderful, right? So the day she gets up, she says, well, we're going to find out in our meeting this morning who gets the special award. I'll call you as soon as I find out. I said, great. So off to work she goes, 7 o'clock in the morning. She gets her break at 11 o'clock. She calls me and she says, I didn't get it. I'm like, what? She goes, I didn't get it. I said, how could that be? I'll tell you when I come home. She comes home at 3:30, sits down, we have coffee, and she says, Keisha got it. I said, Keisha, I thought you were the front runner. She said, hon, I do a good job. Now, this is how you handle defeat, all right? She said, hon, I do a good job. I do a great job. My residents love me. But Keisha just has that little extra, just does that little bit more. So then my wife looked at me and says, you know what? She deserves the award this year. So I'm just going to have to work a little bit harder next year. Boom. And that leads us right into our next quote. The world needs less heat and more light. My late wife chose to be light. She could have been heat. What would have been the heat with being defeated and despair? Oh, Keisha this and Keisha that, and the company doesn't know, right? You can go through the litany of things. But no, she chose the higher road. She chose to be the light rather than the heat. She took a situation, the adversity, the disappointment, and she learned how to handle it by not going after the disappointment, but dealing it within herself. She was the bright light. She was the force that Timothy talks about. She loved the journey. Of course she was disappointed. Of course she was heartbroken. But what she said at the end, I'm going to have to work a little bit harder. It's not what happens to you, it's how you handle it. Defeat is advantageous only when it bends the spirit, but doesn't break it. Her spirit wasn't broken. FDR says this, we have always held to the belief that there is a better life beyond the horizon. Boom. The challenge with all of us, myself included, what do we say in the show? We, me, you, right? The challenge that we have is we see Israel, we see the Ukraine, we see our finances, we see our injured spouse, we see our spouse struggling with illness, we see our children, our adult children coming home. We're just looking at the horizon. We're not looking beyond. Anne Frank looked beyond the horizon. Marshall Dean looked beyond the horizon. My wife looked beyond the horizon. FDR is right. We always had the belief that better things are beyond the horizon, but we just keep looking at the horizon and say, well, that's it. Hopeless, hopeless, hopeless. But the way to gain hope is to realize, I mean, when you ever go to the beach, you look out, you see that straight line, just like they did before they sailed to the New World, right? You see a straight line. But there is something beyond that. Trust me, everyone. Whatever trough you're in, the only way is up. There is more and better for you. It may not be exactly the way you want it, but there is better. There is more. We held to the belief, FDR said, the better life. Drew Barrymore says, life is very interesting. In the end, your greatest pains become your greatest strengths. Boom. And I know a lot of you here in the classroom, this woman's shaking her head, that man's shaking his head. Yeah, a lot of you have been through stuff. Okay? A lot of you are going through stuff. But all the stuff you've gone through, you've come out stronger and better. The spirit isn't broken. And whatever new challenges come your way, you'll come out ahead. Woodrow Wilson, FDR was the 32nd president. Woodrow Wilson, the 28th president of the United States. And he says, you are not here merely to make a living. Oh, that should be my tagline. Some of you got to really take a look at your life and begin to appreciate and do some things, because most of the people who listen to this show are probably over 60, and there's no guarantee we're going to get another 30. Anyway, that's a footnote. You are not here merely to make a living. You are here to enrich the world with a finer spirit of hope. Woodrow Wilson. You're here to enrich the world. You're not here just to make a living. You're not here just to make a business. You're not here just to be, a worker. You're here to enrich the world. What did we say earlier? God's perfect plan, right? It says, and we know all things work together for God's perfect plan. And it goes right back over to Woodrow Wilson, who says you are here for a bigger purpose, for a finer spirit. He uses the same word Timothy does and Beltman does, spirit of hope. And these people didn't live at the same time. But there's a thread here, because these are people that are faithful people. These are people that know that there is something special inside us. At our conception, we are giving a gift. That gift is the spirit, and should never be broken. Bent, but never broken. I'm going to end with the takeaways. I'm going to do something very different that I've never done before. Here's the takeaways. Number one, love the journey. Number two, defeat is always advantageous when it bends the spirit, but does not break it. Belva Lockwood. Some of you are being bent, but you're good. It's going to help you. It's going to form you. It's going to strengthen you. It's going to focus you. It's going to give you new life. There's a man that carried a cross up a hill, and to all the people looking, that horizon looked ugly. And to his bystanders, they thought the dream was over. They were hopeless. But they were wrong. Because 3 days later, that dead man walked out of a tomb and shed his light because he was brave enough. And that light shines on you and me and Jock and Miles and Holly and George and Alicia and Fred and Stan and even Marshall. Defeat is not the end, my friends. Sometimes it's just the beginning. Jock, you want to tie a bow and get to that great song that we have queued up today?
As always, you tend to put things in, let's just say, its proper perspective. And as the great Newt Rockney once stated, it's not how many times you get the heck knocked out of you, it's how many times you get back up and knock the heck out of somebody else.
And it's football season. Good.
Not sure if that was exactly the quote. However, I'm sure that the sentiments ring true and clear. And, it's all about, at the end of the day, being able to resource what you have. Because we were never promised, $1 million and, a huge house and a Ferrari. I don't know if that should even be the goal in life, because there's so many other things that we're to obtain on the journey that are so much more valuable and provide so much more eternal riches. And you hope that understanding at the end of the day that you'll not be able to take any of these material things with you. Hopefully, the memories, the sentiments, the experiences that we have here are translatable, or should I say transferable, therefore giving us even more enhanced purpose and reason for our being and for what we do. So
that's so true. And you said a very smart thing there. And again, referring to my friend, it's not what you can't take it with you, but it's what you leave behind. The legacy. We talked about Anne Frank, right? And I've used her quote a couple of times on these shows, but her legacy, Marshall's legacy, hopefully yours and my legacy. It's how we live our life, how we spread the light. It's the legacy that remains.
And there's those generational legacies too. And
right.
I think we have to ascertain what our individual roles are in those generational legacies. What side of history are we going to plant our feet in?
Yeah. Well said. Well said. So it is Friday Eve and Toho Lounge tonight. Last week they had a sax player from the Allman Brothers Band. His name was Chris with a K.
Chris Jensen.
What?
Chris Jensen.
He was amazing. The band was amazing. Mike on guitar, the drummer, obviously Myron, and Jock Williams, night and day, Dennis Kavanaugh. I'm telling you, boys and girls, it is the gem of Torrington. Get down there Thursday nights, grab a coffee or a drink. They don't push food on you. Have a little cake, sit back, and enjoy New York City jazz right here in Torrington. So enjoy the fall day, listen to the song, and you know what I tell all of you in the classroom? And Stan, thank you. George at the door, thank you. Be yourself. Everyone else is taken. Bye-bye.